Welcome to your number one rock and metal music podcast, brought to you in association with Fireworks Rock and Metal magazine. Issue 102 is out now. 164 pages with more reviews and interviews than any other music magazine. You can find it in W.H. Smith's and other good newsagents, or you can go to www.fireworksmagazine.com or www.firescapeofficial.com and order it as either a physical copy or as a digital download. Now please welcome your host for today's episode, the man with a face fit for radio, the one and only Pete Arnett.
Cheeky bugger. The problem is, though, he's quite correct. Anyway, welcome to all you lovely rock and metal heads, and welcome to Pyrotechnics, the podcast brought to you by Fireworks Rock and Metal magazine. Let me introduce the gruesome twosome that are going to be with me today. I'm only joking, of course, they're very lovely chaps. The first one, if the reviewers and the writers are called the heart of the magazine, then this chap is certainly the aorta. Strong and powerful, keeping us all together, and without him, it would just be chaos, to be honest with you. I am, of course, referring to the sophisticated tones of our deputy editor, Dave Cockett. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me back.
Thank you for joining us. We also have the gentleman that makes this magazine just look so damn beautiful. Without him, you are not going to get half the magazine you get. He's just absolutely fantastic at what he does. I am, of course, referring to the smooth voice of our art editor, Mr. James Gaden. Welcome, James.
Hello, everybody.
Right then, chaps, let us start with one question, and that is, how did you both get into rock and metal music? Dave, I'm going to throw that one over to you first.
How did I get into rock and metal music? That's an interesting one. I was born in mid-60s. So I was going to... I started to really listen to music that my parents would listen to. My dad's a big classical music fan, always was. Loves the likes of Beethoven, Wagner, Bach. Mozart was always his favourite. He loved opera, although I could never get it. So I was exposed to quite a bit of that as a kid, and then my mum was listening to the stuff, the stuff from the 60s, early 70s. Listened to Terry Wogan in the morning on the way to school, or before I went to school. But from my perspective, when I really started to get into music, I suppose the first thing, to be honest, was ABBA. And that probably was we would watch Eurovision. It was a family event. You'd watch it every year. So got into ABBA primarily because the blonde looked gorgeous to an 8-year-old. But no, sort of got into ABBA, and they would always be my first musical love, if I'm honest. But from that, then going into senior school in the late 70s, that's when you become exposed to people who's got much more varied tastes. Although that was primarily driven by what was big at the time. It was post-punk, so it was when ska was getting big. So you get the likes of Specials and Madness and things like that coming along, and then the Police, and people were listening to all that sort of stuff. And the Jam was another one. I'm thinking, yeah, this is okay. Then we started getting on the radio. You started getting stuff like the odd Rainbow track, the odd AC/DC track, and that sort of struck a chord with me. And I'm thinking, yeah, I quite like that. And then I sort of met a bunch of like-minded kids at school that were in some of the classes that I used to be in when after you'd taken your options and you all split off into different groups. And they introduced me to the likes of Iron Maiden and Saxon. And it sort of flourished from there, really. I would say my first three loves in rock and metal were Rainbow, AC/DC, who are my favourite band, and UFO, because I heard Schenker and it was just wow. You just listen to the guy, the extended solo on Rock Bottom, and it just blows your mind. And it certainly did in the late 70s. But it kind of mushroomed from there, and I've got, I guess, a bit of an addictive personality when it comes to anything like that. I'm either in or out. If I'm in 150%. And that's what it's been with rock and metal ever since it started, really. So from there, it was getting into things like, I remember getting, I think that the first two, I used to buy music to start with on cassette, would you believe? The first two actual vinyl albums I bought were the first two Iron Maiden albums. And that would be about a month or two before Number of the Beast came out. Then Number of the Beast came out, and it sort of just exploded from there. And particularly with Kerrang coming along, and all of a sudden, not only have you got all this exciting new music, you've got a publication all to your very self that's talking about the exact sort of stuff that you want to listen to. So it got into some of the early European stuff like Pretty Maids, who's always been a big band for me, TNT, and it sort of, I think, from an American band perspective, it wasn't the likes of Kiss or something like that did it. It was Y&T. They were the first American band that I really got into massively, and that was around about the time that Black Tiger came out. So then obviously went back to Earthshaker, and it just exploded from there. And it's as new stuff came along. I mean, my appetite just got bigger and bigger and bigger. I remember listening to Tommy Vance for Friday night, devouring what he was playing, going out and trying to source it. And it's just it's developed from there. It's something it's probably the one constant that's stuck with me throughout my life, if I'm honest.
Brilliant. No, I agree with the constant. Yeah. I mean, music shapes the soundtrack of life, doesn't it? In some respects.
Yeah.
James, again, same question to you. How did you get into rock and metal music?
Primarily through my parents, because they were rock and metal fans anyway. They, obviously, I don't remember this, but apparently my mum was pregnant with me when they saw Thin Lizzy for what would have been the tour that Live and Dangerous was recorded for. And they also went to see Status Quo. And apparently I was kicking in time to the beat. So that sort of like set the thing. So it wasn't until I was like sort of in the 80s, there was Queen live at Wembley, was broadcast on television on Channel 4, I think it was. And my mum and dad liked Queen. So I sat and watched it, and I was just in absolute awe because I'd never seen a live concert of any description before. So you got Freddie there in his iconic leather jacket, just being an absolute god. Obviously, we talked about last podcast how I was Roger Taylor. I was like, who's that guy? But everything about that show was just like, the songs are great. It's, all these people, that's the only band I'm ever going to listen to. And that was it. I made myself a little cassette of Queen music, and I was listening to Queen all the time. My dad had all the Queen albums. And we was on the way to college one morning, and the radio was on in the car, and Living on a Prayer came on. I just looked, and I went to my dad, what's this? And my dad went, Bon Jovi. I was like, it's brilliant. He was like, I'm sure I've got this at home. So when I got home the next night, he went, there you are, and he lobbed me Slippery and Wet. And I listened to that, and I was like, this is the best thing I've ever heard. And I was listening, I devoured it, and he was like, well, try that one. And he gave me New Jersey to listen to. I was like, this is my new favourite band. And then my dad went, oh, if you like that, try this. And he gave me Whitesnake. And then as soon as I heard David Coverdale, it was like the voice of God. So it just went from there. And then he was like, well, if you like Whitesnake, try Rainbow. And obviously, and then, oh, if you like this, well, they came from Deep Purple. And then obviously that opens the door to Sabbath and Dio and Gillan. And it just went on and on and on. And there used to be a show called Rock Family Trees that was broadcast on the BBC. And that's basically how my mind works. It's like, this guy was in this band. Where did he come from? And then you trace it back and it all branches off. Because, you know, just from like Purple alone, look how many different pathways that leads you to. Everything from like Black Sabbath to Gary Moore. So there was all these different things. And I'm, like Dave says, you know, I had this voracious appetite. I'm naturally inquisitive by nature. So I was like, what else has that guy done? What else has he? So it's just gone on from there. And then obviously when I joined Fireworks, that opened things up to a bunch of lesser known bands, like I mentioned in the last podcast, with people like Taiketo, for instance, that I hadn't come across. I started discovering acts like that as well, and it's just gone on from there.
Well, I've got to admit, I think all three of us can agree that our parents have had quite a lot to play with this, because I remember my mum got the first stereo system where we had, which was an old-fashioned kind of stylus, separate tape recorders, but the stylus was one of those massive heavy things, and she bought 2 albums. And it's funny actually, because you guys have both mentioned the bands. The first one was ABBA, and the second one was Queen's Greatest Hits. And once you got it onto the turntable, and once you managed to get the turntable stylus to actually stay on the record and not do that bouncy thing that you used to do with the old-fashioned ones, as soon as the first track came in, like you, I was like, good God, who are these? And you know, that's how I got into rock music as well. And like you discover other bands. I think we can safely say that James Freddie Mercury, And with Dave, we've had is it Brian Johnson or Bon Scott, AC/DC? Memory's gone already. That's a good start for the podcast, isn't it? But the thing I'm trying to basically say is voices. Obviously, it's the frontmen who sing the words, and it's the frontmen that usually catch the imagination. But the question now that I'm going to ask, and this is leading now onto our main topic of the show, is: would you rather have a singer who is note perfect but has no showmanship skills, or a showman who is an average singer but can work a crowd perfectly? Now, of course, when I'm saying this, I'm referring to live, because obviously we all know the magic that can happen behind a mixing desk. We all know that even I could sound like a world-beating record singing person. And if you heard my singing voice, then animals run in terror. That certainly isn't the case. But yeah, so that is my question to these chaps. So, James, would you rather have a singer who is note perfect but can't hold a crowd for toffee, or a showman who is absolutely perfect at holding a crowd but is average at best?
Ooh, that's difficult.
I know.
I always gravitate to singers, as in their ability. That's the first thing. But in a live situation, you can sort of get away with it because there's people singing along. It's more about the atmosphere, more about the vibe. I've been to concerts and thought they were amazing, and then heard bootlegs of them and thought, Christ, that sounds awful. But it doesn't when you're there. That's like the essential difference. And so, yeah, I can sort of get it. If I had to choose, I think I would rather go and see somebody who's going to deliver the goods musically rather than prance about and be chronic. Ideally, you want a blend of both, but if I can only have one or the other, I would rather sit and... So, like, I'd rather have somebody who can nail every song, but maybe not move about much, than prance around and huff and puff like Vince Neil, dropping every third word.
Right, okay. And Dave, obviously the same question to you as well.
Yeah, I agree with James to a certain extent. There are singers that you'll go and see every time that are note perfect. Steve Overland's always stood out for me in that regard. Every time you see him with FM or whoever, he's brilliant. He's grown into a bit of a frontman, I think, as well over the years. But then at the other end of the scale, you've got the likes of Ozzy, who was never the world's best singer. He would admit that himself, but he could put on a show, and he held you. He held you enthralled throughout, even if it's what the hell's the guy going to do next? What's he going to bite this time? Or you get people like some David Lee Roth. He was another one. He wasn't the greatest singer, but he was a hell of a showman. I think the reality of it is that the Freddie Mercurys of this world are once in a generation. You don't get... It's very, very rare you'll find one guy or one lady or one day or whatever the hell you want to call them that's perfect at both. Freddie was, but most of the rest don't come close. Bon Scott was never the world's greatest vocalist. I'm sure he would have admitted that. I never got to see him live, unfortunately. He passed by the time I started gigging. But when you actually look back at some of the footage, the way he could work a crowd was the sort of thing that everybody should aspire to. So I think... I would agree with James to a certain extent. Yes, I've been to gigs where the vocalists have been terrible, and you're thinking, Christ, what is this guy on? And to be fair, in more recent times, it's some of the bigger, older guys, not wishing to mention any names. The more intelligent ones learn how to deal with it, and they get a band in that can add great backing vocals to carry it. The ones that haven't learnt how to deal with it just get slated all over the internet. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But in an ideal world, you would get the best of both. If I had to pick, I would err towards a showman that could sing. And that's probably not the answer that you're after. But I would certainly, if you got a showman that was terrible vocally, it would grate after a while. But sometimes when they just stand there and they're note perfect... he's like the new guy in Journey. I mean, I've seen him have off nights. I've seen him when he's just been pitch perfect all the way through, but he just stands there. There's no there's no emotion. To me, there's not the emotion that Perry put into it. He's just a Perry clone. And I think that it needs to be a balance between the two, but it's a rare breed to actually find somebody like that. There aren't many that grab you. I mean, you get to the likes of Phil Lynott, and that's different again, because not only was he was a great vocalist for Lizzie, he was obviously a poet. He was a great bass player. But he was the centre of the Lizzie shows. Your focus was on him all the time. But no, I'll cop out. I would go for a showman that sings every turn, that can sing every turn.
If that's an option, so would I.
It wasn't an option. Cheers, Dave, for breaking the rules. That's brilliant. The reason why I'm asking this is because, as I've said before, the wife and I went to see Michael Bublé. It was a present for her. And while it's not the style of music I enjoy, I mean, to be fair, they're slow crooning songs anyway that he sings, and he slows them down even more. So, you know, your 4.5 minute My Way became like a 10-minute opus, which kind of did my head in an awful lot. But as a showman, he had the audience in the palm of his hand every time he opened his mouth. His language was a bit choice, especially with young kids in the audience. But to be fair as well, he was very, very good with the young kids. He was going down, signing things, going into the crowd, pulling certain people out, you know, getting them on stage, having a good time with them. And he really, really, really did keep people entertained. I mean, my missus loves his singing anyway, so she said he was absolutely perfect from every bit that he did. But what I want to do now is I've asked him to get a pen and paper before we started, because I've got a list of names here. Without cheating again, Dave, and altering the rules, if you could, when I read out these names, I want you to just put next to them showman or singer. Okay, now we've already mentioned a couple of them, so this should be quite easy. And guys, listeners as well at home, if you want to join in, you know, do so as well. You know, let us know what you think about these people. Are they showmen or singers? And would you rather have the perfect singer or the perfect showman? So first name up, Freddie Mercury of Queen. Second name, Alice Cooper. Third name, Dennis DeYoung. Brian Johnson, AC/DC, of course. Lou Gramm, a Foreigner. Steve Perry, Journey. We might have just lost Dave there. One that might throw the cat amongst the pigeons a little bit, Pat Benatar. John Bon Jovi, of course, of Bon Jovi, already mentioned. So we've definitely lost Dave now. Stevie Nicks, Fleetwood Mac and Various. Jeff Scott Soto, Various. But Ronnie Romero. Dave, come back. Yes, listeners, that is tears you can hear in the background. And Jolyn Turner, obviously of Rainbow, Sunstorm, and other groups as well. Now, I think you'll agree that is probably quite a wide range of names. I mean, I could have gone on for ages, but obviously there is a time limit to these. So be interesting to see if the guys do actually agree with one another, because obviously working in the rock and music industry, they may have similar views, but hopefully in some respects they won't, and we can get a bit of a debate going. So first one, obviously, Freddie Mercury, showman or perfect singer? Dave, you're not allowed to say both.
You can't pick that. He was the one that you would say there was both. If I had to pick, showman, absolutely.
I'd agree, for the simple reason that yes, he was absolutely both, but there were certain occasions live when he knew he couldn't replicate what he did on the record, so he'd drop it down, or he'd sing. He knew how to get away with it. If you listen to some of the live renditions, he knows, I can't do that falsetto tonight, or I can't do it, so I'll go a different way. So he isn't singing them perfect, but he's still singing them really well. But his showmanship was never in question. So if you had to pick one of the two, showman.
Yeah, very, very clever was Freddie, wasn't he, with that?
Yeah, superb.
Definitely.
Right then, Alice Cooper.
Showman, 100%.
Definitely, 100% Showman.
Which does, in fairness, do a disservice to his singing, because you rarely hear Alice have an off night vocally, because he stays very much within his remit.
Mm.
He knows what he can do and he stays within it.
Yeah.
But it's all about the show with Alice. I mean, as luck would have it, I watched his Theatre of Death, I think it was called, Theatre of Pain, something like that, Theatre of Death, the other week on DVD. And the entire show was just exactly that. It was a show with a load of songs in. And it was like a full experience. And you can't knock him. It's like there's not many people who can put on something like that.
Yeah. Alice is the missing link between rock shows and the West End, if you like, or with theatre. He marries the two worlds perfectly. You're right. If you're going to see Alice, you're going to see a show. You're not going to see a guy stand on stage and sing. Yeah, he can carry a tune, and yes, there's no mistaking whenever you hear him, it's Alice Cooper. So that's always got to be something that's in his favour. But no, he's just the pinnacle of what a showman should be, really.
One of the points I wanted to make, do you think that because of the shows that Alice Cooper puts on, so spectacular, as James has alluded to, you've seen the video, you know what they're like, you're going to get a performance and a show when you go and see one of his concerts. Do you think in some respects he can get away with not being the world's greatest singer because everybody's too focused on the shows? And is that just very, very clever from him?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's always been the same. He, as James said earlier, he realizes what his limitations are. Mm. He plays completely within those, but he always delivers a show. I think he looks at it as that a vocal is just a tool to help deliver the show. It isn't a guy getting up there singing. It is just part of the show, and that's it. That's exactly what it's all about.
Yeah, totally. I agree with that. Alice can do quite a few things vocally, but he doesn't need to, because it doesn't suit this character, this persona that he's put together. There's no need for him, and it's, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. He's been doing it a long time, and he's still doing it at the top level.
Yeah, you don't want Freddy Krueger crying into his coffee singing a ballad. So absolutely, Alice is Alice, and we all know, we all have this idea of what Alice is, what Alice does, how he behaves on stage, and it wouldn't work if he changed it. He'd get stick for doing it, for trying it. So why bother when you can go and you can fill arenas and still do it into your 70s? Good luck to the guy. Always entertaining every time I've seen him. It's brilliant.
Indeed. Totally agree. Well, there's another episode for a podcast. What song would we get Freddy Krueger crying into his coffee for, singing a ballad? So if you've got any ideas, chaps, let us know, because that could be an interesting one. Right, back to the list. Right, so we got Dennis DeYoung.
Singer.
I would agree, but also my caveat on that is I've never seen Styx live, so I have no experience of how he'd perform. But from what I've seen and heard on the internet stuff, I would say singer.
Yeah. I've seen Styx a couple of times, but not with Dennis. Styx were never the most visually exciting band. It was always musically that did it for me. You would if you went along to see Styx, you could close your eyes, and it's not like you're listening to the record. The live gig's always got a different vibe to it, but it wasn't to see the band jump about or whatever. The music it didn't lend itself to that. It was much more sophisticated, and I think that Dennis fit the bill perfectly. He's a great singer.
Agreed, definitely agreed. Brian Johnson, obviously AC/DC.
I was hoping you'd say Bon Scott, as we alluded to earlier. Bon Scott would be my all-time favourite frontman, if you like. But Brian Johnson, again, I think he came in when AC/DC had already got a very rich legacy. He's added to it, certainly. He's not surpassed what went before, apart from in a couple of instances where they've released a couple of songs that probably just about match up to the Bon Scott era. But I would say that Brian Johnson knows exactly what he's brought in for. He was there to carry a show. And it was originally the Bon and Angus show. It's since become the Brian and Angus show. And that's what it'll always be. And just like Alice Cooper, the voice is there to support the show rather than... there are times that you hear him, he sounds off. Particularly, I think the River Plate live album, some of the vocals on there are suspect. But he knows that half of the time the audience are going to be singing their head off to these big anthems anyway, and it's just to support that. So definitely, I would say Showmen.
I disagree on that, Scott. I actually think Bina would be more of a singer for the simple reason I think Angus is the showman in AC/DC. He's the one doing the duck walk and wearing the school uniform and drawing your eye visually, whereas Bina stood there usually in a vest and a flat cap. He's literally the working man Geordie who comes on and belts the songs out. So I think his role there is singer. Even though his voice isn't acquired taste, I don't think he's there to be the showman. I think he's there to be the singer, and Angus is the showman, personally.
Dave, any come back on that one?
Well, again, we just agree to disagree. As I say, I think it's that the AC/DC is a show. It's a spectacle. It's not about a singer. Yes, Angus is the lead, but the rest of the supporting cast. And as I say, I think that it was originally the Bon and Angus show, and Brian came in and sort of took that over, sort of carrying him through the crowd on his shoulders and all that type of thing. So I just think I'm coming from the point of view is I see him more as a showman than a singer. He's singer as a singer. He's got limitations, so that's where I was coming from really. No problem with his voice. It's an acquired taste. I've acquired it, but yeah.
Superb. Right, this is what we want. We want arguments. We want debates. Lou Graham, beg your pardon, foreigner.
Singer.
Definitely.
Because with the best will in the world, I've seen quite a few foreigner gigs. And Lou's a brilliant singer, but I don't think he would ever say he was particularly an active frontman. He goes out there and he smashes it most nights until he fell ill with his brain tumour. He was nailing it. And then when Kelly Hansen's come in, same sort of thing. Kelly's actually a bit more active than Lou. But Lou, I think, will always be referred to as one of the great melodic rock singers. I don't think anybody's ever calling him a frontman.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think he's I wouldn't say standoffish, but he was almost like he was a reserved singer in terms of he would go on stage and he knew what his job was to do. His job was to sing. It wasn't to actually to sort of get the crowd frothing at the gills. That's not what Foreigner was all about, and he just did it perfectly. But definitely a singer over a frontman any day.
And the next one, I think we started to lose Dave with Steve Perry from Journey.
I would go singer, personally. Again, because I don't think... I've never seen Journey as a visual band. Perry was a great vocalist, if you like that style of vocals. They've got a carbon copy in now, doing the Steve Perry-isms. But you can't fault... Journey's best period was with Steve Perry. It worked best when the three sparked off one another. Sean, Kane and Perry. Because as James wrote, I think recently, that they'd all come from a different stance, and sometimes one would win out, sometimes the other would win out, sometimes they'd find sort of I wouldn't say happy medium ground, but maybe some sort of ceasefire for a while. But yeah, it all stems from the fact that Perry could perhaps have an audience eating out of the palm of his hand from the fact that they're going, wow, what a vocalist. But as something to watch, nah.
Yeah, totally agree with that. As I mentioned in the last podcast we did, when he turned down Neil Sean's amp and says they want to hear the voice, that's what he brought. It was the voice. It wasn't anything particularly visual.
Yeah.
His voice was what carried Journey through that period. And nobody was going to see him, like, jumping off the drum riser or, giving a bird in the front row a kiss or out like that. Nobody was interested in that. It was all about the vocals. And so, singer.
Fair enough. Next one I'm going to be interested to hear about is Pat Benatar.
I have no idea because I've never seen Pat Benatar live. So I'm going to guess singer, but I've got no clue what she performs like. So difficult one for me to actually weigh in on that one.
I've never seen her live. I've seen footage of her live. I would have, had you allowed me, I would have erred towards both. Because she seems quite, I wouldn't say animated on stage, but she seems to sort of to be able to engage with an audience in a way that the likes of Graham and Perry couldn't. And she's got a reasonable singing voice. She's not the best singer out there. She's not Ann Wilson. But she's got she's got a fairly decent singing voice. So I think I would probably err on the side of singer if I had to pick. But she's more of a show person, front woman than Perry or Graham were.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Fair. John Bon Jovi.
Well,
I've been shot and put out of everybody's misery, but hey.
Oh.
John's neither nowadays, is he really?
But he's an entertainer. If you looked at it to take it to its worst extreme, it's a car crash. He's Bon Jovi these days.
And I'd like to welcome our next guest, John Bon Jovi.
I to be fair, I haven't been interested in Bon Jovi musically for 25 years. I probably should have stopped buying Bon Jovi albums 10 years before I actually did. I think the last one was probably about 10 years ago or something like that, when I got to the stage, I thought, you know what, this just ain't me. I saw them 3 times. And to me, they got progressively worse as a band, and that was in the heyday. I saw them, the first time I saw them was on the Slippery When Wet tour, when they played at Manchester with at the Apollo with FM supporting, and they were good. And they were everybody's favourite band at that point in time. Living on a Prayer and You Give Love a Bad Name had sort of stormed the UK charts. That was the time. It was the toss up between their gig and Europe when they did the Final Countdown. I've never been to a gig like it. So many screaming girls with next to no clothes on. Fantastic. I thought I'd landed on a different planet. But the next time I saw Bon Jovi on the New Jersey tour when they took it into arenas in this country. And it was good, but again, John's voice, there was something about it. It was never the greatest. He was always a bit more of a frontman, pretty boy, than he was a singer. And then the last time I saw him was when they headlined Donington, and I'd lost interest, I think, at that point, really. So if I had to pick, I would say showman rather than vocalist or certain singer. Definitely these days, on the basis that it's like watching a car crash. It's the sort of thing you shouldn't, but you just can't turn away now.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. In their stadium heyday, they used to have all sorts of things going on. They had some pyro, and I remember watching a video where he came down on some wires, and so that's all about being a showman. Nobody's going to call him the best singer in the world, even when he was good. He wasn't the best. He wasn't even the best singer in Bon Jovi.
No, he wasn't. Not at all.
But as Dave pointed out, he has got something's happened to him. Last time I saw him live was 2005 or 6 on the Have a Nice Day tour, and Sambora was still with him, and they were all right, and that's the best I could say. They were all right, and they didn't look like they were particularly interested in being there. One of my friends was there, who was an avid Bon Jovi fan, who'd seen him multiple times, and she said, yeah, that wasn't the best show they've ever put on. It was okay. But yeah, vocally, bit hit and miss. Sambora was spot on, but John Bon Jovi wasn't. So yeah, I think you'd have to say frontman, even though I don't think he's that good a frontman.
Sambora was the best musician in the band by a country mile.
Yeah.
The music and vocalist, yeah.
Okay, well, then there we go. That's what we want. We want some debate. So this is getting good. Right, Stevie Nicks, Fleetwood Mac, and obviously various other projects as well.
Stevie's a difficult one. Stevie has her limitations as a vocalist, but she's decently good enough to carry a tune. She's obviously in a day. She's beautiful, but I think she's got this aura about her that, whilst she's not particularly overly active on stage, there's something about her performance that's mesmerising. So I would say showman or showwoman.
Yes, PC.
Yeah, I see what Dave means there. Personally, as much as I like some Fleetwood Mac stuff, I don't really like Stevie Nicks. I've never liked her voice, and her solo stuff's never interested me. If you said to me, you could have only 3 people of Fleetwood Mac in the band, Buckingham, Nicks or McVie, Nicks would be the first one out the door. For me, it's just like, I know there's loads of people who think she's great. I've never got it. I do understand what Dave's coming from, where she does have some sort of presence on stage. Not to the point where I think that makes her a front woman. She's just got some, I don't know, maybe an aura, a bit of charisma or whatever. But whenever I watch Fleetwood Mac, it's Lindsay Buckingham I'm watching, not Stevie. And whenever I'm listening to the records, it's usually the Buckingham tracks I'm listening to, or the McVie tracks, not the Stevie ones. If I'm forced to pick one,
you are.
Yeah, I'd probably say showwoman then.
Yeah, I agree with you there, James. I think that Christine McVie was by far the better singer.
Yeah,
Lindsay Buckingham was by far the better songwriter. But it is just that there isn't some sort of aura about Stevie Nicks. And whether that's part of the sort of mystery that it's all wrapped up in, and all the sort of troubles that her and Lindsay had, the very fact that you go back to the days of the early Kerrangs, and they used to have the polls and it were the sexiest women. Well, you got Stevie Nicks and Pat Benatar basically goes there was bugger all anybody else. So whether that's something to do with this or not, I don't know. But no, there's just something about Stevie. I've got her autobiography queued up, ready to read, actually. So I'll let you know once I've had a delve to see what it's. But I think she's an interesting woman, shall we say?
Yes, definitely agreed. I mean, listeners, do you agree with what James and Dave are saying here? Are you saying this is all rubbish? They're getting the wrong answers. Let us know. Comment down below. Let us know. Like I say, we want to get a debate going, and this is hopefully what's going to happen. Next one up, Jeff Scott Soto, again, of various projects.
That's a tough one, because he's really both. I've seen Jeff a number of times with different people, and he's just so engaging, but he's such a fantastic vocalist. Again, he's one of those voices. He can work from anything from metal to AOR. You can still tell it's Jeff, but it still sounds great. But he can work a crowd. He really can work a crowd, and that's what a frontman's been all about. So if I had to pick, I would err to a frontman, but he's a frontman who's a great vocalist. So I'm cheating again, Pete.
I don't know.
I totally get where Dave's coming from. Jeff is a supremely versatile vocalist who can do all kinds of things.
Definitely.
And he always puts on a great show. So that's what you're looking for. But we do have to pick one. So I've seen him live. I've seen him with Jenny. I've seen him solo. Always great. But I would say, just for the sheer versatility of the things he's recorded, I'm going to pick him as a singer and a frontman second.
I didn't want to make this easy for you guys. I mean, where would be the fun in that, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Right then. Dave, please come back now. Ronnie Romero.
I could sum up in one word. Overexposed. Romero's, I've never seen him. I've no desire to see most of the projects, bands that he's involved with. He does far too much. He's a passable singer. He's got a powerful voice in a sort of sub-Dio type of way. I've seen footage with his band Lords of Black where he seems most comfortable. I would definitely say if as a frontman he's still learning his craft, so on that basis alone he's got to be a singer. But as I said, to sum up in one word, overexposed.
I couldn't agree more on that one. I even used that exact word in relation to Ronnie Romero in one of my reviews in the upcoming Fireworks, because it's just on everything. It's like, there's this album and Ronnie Romero's on it, and we're releasing this. It's a brand new band and Ronnie Romero's the singer, and this guy, it's going to be Ronnie Romero. It's like almost to the point where I opened the door to go out to work and he stood there looking at me. It's like you can't get away from him, and he's all right, but he's not that good. It's like, well, he was Rainbow's last singer. Let's be honest, it wasn't Rainbow. Not in any kind of description. It was Richie Blackmore and Some Hired Guns. It wasn't Rainbow. And for him basically to have traded off that handful of, frankly, crap gigs, because I had to review that Monsters in Rock, or Memories in Rock, I think it was called, where he was wheeled out to perform perfunctory versions of Rainbow and Deep Purple tracks, and it was horrible. It was really poor. And I remember talking to Kieran Dargan, and he went to see it, and he was like, it was great. And I listened to the recording, and I was like, it certainly wasn't. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. When you're there and people are singing along and there's the nostalgia and the atmosphere, you can get away with it. When you listen to the raw audio of what was going on, he was like, this is as far away from Rainbow as it's possible to get. So I would have to say singer.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to there falls under the same umbrella as mass hysteria. Is that people are they're convinced when they're at a gig that it's better than something it actually is when you actually stand back and look at it in the cold light of day. I don't think I think Ronnie Romero will have a career as such, being one of these singers for hire. I don't think he'll ever find a niche. I don't think he'll ever find a band that will take him anywhere that he's going to be able to make a living. I mean, unfortunately, I think that for a lot of people these days. But I just think he's this month's flash in the pan, and there'll be another one along in 10 minutes, a bit like Buses.
So again, let us know, people. Do you agree? Is Ronnie Romero, your cup of tea? If he is, obviously let us know. I'm going to strike him off the guest list for next week. To be fair, I don't think he's ever going to come near us with a 10-mile bar spell now. To be honest with you, but yeah. So the final one we had, Joe Lynn Turner, Rainbow, Sunstorm, and again, plenty of other projects.
I think that's a no-brainer. I think that's got to be Singer. Richie Blackmore would never have picked somebody who was going to steal the limelight from him on stage. So I think just purely on that basis alone, plus the fact that he's done some great albums, he's got a great vocalist, Singer.
Yeah, I'd agree. Joe is one of my all-time favourite singers. He's absolutely world-class, and he can nail pretty much any style you give him. He does put on a good show, but I don't think he would admit, I don't think anything he does on stage is ever going to eclipse what he does vocally. So, Singer.
So, basically, all that was leading to one question.
What about Michael Bublé?
What about Michael Bublé? Yeah, he ain't coming on the show neither, let's put it that way. In essence, I mean, the gig was very, very good, don't get me wrong. It's just his awful habit of slowing down slow songs already. And, I mean, you guys know, you've been to concerts. Sometimes you just sit there thinking, oh, for God's sake, speed it up a little bit. It's bad enough.
Usually happens when it's a solo.
Yeah. It's bad enough sometimes when the song's slow already. Yeah. But when they slow it down even more, and then when they sort of do this, like you said, this long-winded musical bit, and then they're talking and doing some of it, and then they start singing the same song again, and by the end of it, you're like, that's half an hour past, and we've sung one song. That was the only problem that I had with Michael Bublé. But as a showman, he was absolutely spot on. Like I say, he held the audience in his palm of his hands. He was funny, he was entertaining, he was engaging. He brought kids up on the stage, he signed the posters, which is something that very rarely happens nowadays. He actually went into the audience. I mean, his security guard was having a nightmare, to be fair with him. I mean, it was all filmed as well, so you could see all around the arena what he was doing. And this poor security guard trailing behind him, literally trying to hold on to him. He's leaning over the barriers. He's trying to stop people from literally touching every part of his body. It was one of those things where you think, to have that level of interest from an audience was absolutely amazing. And fair play to him for being able to do that. The thing that really got me was that the show only lasted 1 hour and 35 minutes. And I think he got about 7 songs done. Might be a slight, over-exaggeration. I think it might have been 7 or 10. But the point I'm making is every single song seemed like it went on for an eternity. But as a showman, he was absolutely perfect. Mm. So then, chaps, having discussed these people and having had a bit of a debate about them, Dave's already broken the rules anyway, so in some respects I have a sneaking suspicion I know the answer to this next one. But would you say that there is such a thing as a complete frontman, that showman, singer, performer, entertainer, engages from point A to point B from start to finish? And if there is, who would you say it was or is?
Freddie Mercury.
James?
Definitely. Yeah. If we're talking about who's around now, I would throw Steve Tyler into the mix.
Oh.
Because Steven Tyler pretty much always delivers the goods vocally, but he's the thing you're watching when Aerosmith are performing. He's the one twirling the mic stand, doing the odd cartwheel, coming out. He's got the handkerchiefs tied to the mic stand. He's the one who communicates with the audience, and he very rarely gets it wrong.
I think you could have levelled that at him 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I know the first gig that my good lady and I went to on our own, we went to see Aerosmith. I forget which tour it was now, but it was at the old NEC in Birmingham, and Thunder were supporting them just as Backstreet Symphony came out. And it was a phenomenal gig. Thunder were awesome, but then Aerosmith came on, and it was just something else. And that was after they got clean, they'd got their act together, they got great albums under the belts, and they were just on fire. So I would say yes, probably. You're probably right. Whether he could still do it now, don't know.
Fair enough. Right. Okay. So we have Freddie Mercury, Steven Tyler. As we've got from the names, the list of names that we've had as well, there is possibly a few more. So, gentlemen, you have been tasked with forming your own band, and we'll think about names later. But First person you got to pick, and it can be either someone that's living or has died, but is basically whoever your pick wants to be. Who are you going to have as the frontman of your fictitious group?
Ronnie Romero.
And James is disqualified straight away.
Coverdale. David Coverdale. David Coverdale in prime.
All right, so Dave's gone with David Coverdale. James, yours is...
Which is a hell of a shout, because Coverdale in his prime, vocally brilliant, and he could put on a show as well. You know, the things he did with a mic stand were obscene.
Yeah.
But, who would I have as my singer? My front man?
It's funny how you went to singer then.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. I always gravitate to singers. So I'm going to say... It'd be easy if I picked Freddie Mercury, so I'm going to say Jolene Turner.
Okay, so James has gone Jolene Turner, Dave has gone David Coverdale. So, gentlemen, remember these, because obviously as the weeks go on, I'm going to ask you to make your fantasy band. Let's see who you put in it, and then at the end of it, obviously, I'll let you pick a name for it. So that's a good start. Michael Bublé on backing vocals. Oh, good God, this is never going to end, is it? Okay, so that's that segment done. So we're now going to move on to a new section, which I've called It's on Social Media, so it's got to be true, doesn't it? Right, as you well know, obviously being the social media manager of Fireworks Rock and Metal magazine, I like to keep an eye on things that are going on. We've already had a few debates. We've had the Journey one. We've had... who was it?
The
Motley Crue, that's it, yeah. It's... So many things be happening every week, but one that seems to be coming back time and time again is the Van Halen debate. So much so that I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run our own poll, and see what our listeners have thought of it and see what people thought of it. And basically, if you don't know the Van Halen debate, it's a case of, were they best with David Lee Roth? Were they best with Sammy Hagar? Or were they best with Gary Cherone? Now, I deliberately didn't put those three names into the poll for the put those three names into that list before for the simple reason it probably would have killed this conversation dead. But some of the arguments I've heard for both, some of the arguments I've heard for David Lee Roth were he was the original and therefore the best. Their debut album was the best, therefore David Lee Roth was the best. And he's the better showman, which obviously ties into what we've just been discussing. Sammy Hagar produced more melodic vocals. His singing was more in tune with the whole of the band's sound, and he made the band look more serious. Gary Cherone, I can find absolutely nothing for. No, I mean, that possibly is a damning indictment of Mr. Cherone, but I think it's maybe just a case of obviously the debate settled more on Lee Roth and Hagar. So the results of the poll so far, I've just looked within the last hour before we started the show, were David Lee Roth polled 52%. Sammy Hagar polled 43%, and Gary Cherone polled 5%. So, asking Dave this one first, David Lee Roth, Sammy Hagar, Gary Cherone.
I'm just interested as to the 5% that voted for Gary Cherone. Has Bruce been playing at Naughty Buggers in the background again? No disrespect to Gary, he's a great frontman for Extreme. He wasn't a great frontman for Van Halen. I think it was the Poison Chalice by that stage, if I'm absolutely honest. So I'm not going to diss Gary as a great vocalist, but he just wasn't right for Van Halen. I don't think anybody would have been at that point in time. Now, Van Halen, Hagar versus Dave Lee Roth. Dave Lee Roth, undoubtedly a better showman. Sammy Hagar, miles better vocalist. Who was the best fit for Van Halen? It really depends on what your interpretation of what Van Halen should be is all about. If you're looking at the corporate entity that sounded not too dissimilar to everybody else in the late 80s, then by all means, Sammy was your man. If you want something that was a bit more exciting, a bit more kick-ass, a bit more rock and roll, a bit more hungry, you've got to go with Dave Lee Roth. Because that's where it all started. That's what the Van Halen sound was to me. And to be fair, I think much as I've got no problem at all, I've got plenty of love for the Van Hagar era. I think Sammy produced better material before he joined Van Halen. I think that I wouldn't say Sammy peaked, but you can't. Who could argue with the Montrose debut? But I think to get back to Van Halen for me was all about the raucousness, the rock and roll, the exciting, something different to what anybody else was doing. Van Halen exploded on the scene as a guitar player in the late 70s. People were, wow, what's this? Where's this guy come from? There was none of that when Sammy joined. The songs got slower. Yes, they got more melodic. The shows got more boring. I just think that if you, to me, the essence of Van Halen was when Dave Lee Roth was the front man, and I won't change. I don't see how what came afterwards can be compared to that because it was a different band for a different time.
Fair enough, James.
That last statement there pretty much sums it up for me. Different band for a different time. Because I came into Van Halen hearing Sammy first. I remember being sat in a cinema and they were playing some music before the film came on, and Dreams came on. And I heard it. I looked at my dad and went, "Who's this?" And my dad went, "Sounds a bit like Sammy Hagar." And he was right again. So, of course, it was Van Halen. So I ended up getting the 5150 album off the back of that and thought it was amazing. And I eventually got to pick the first Van Halen album up. And when I first heard David Lee Roth, I was like, well, this guy's rubbish, because I was used to hearing Sammy Hagar. That opinion has since changed. I love both Dave and Sammy as artists, and somewhat controversially, I like both their solo stuff better than what they ever did with Van Halen. The first Van Halen album is the best one, no doubt about that. But they then went on with Dave to make a bunch of albums that never got anywhere near better in it, or even coming close to equaling it, in my opinion. They made a couple in there that I thought were pretty weak.
Yeah.
And when Sammy came in, yes, it did change the sound, and it did change, it was more commercial, more sort of hit driven. But I don't think that's just down to Sammy or just down to the corporate, world that they were operating in. I think Eddie had also wanted to spread his musical wings a little bit, because he exploded with that first album with all these new like tapping techniques and things that people weren't really aware of. And by the time we got to the end of Dave's run, Eddie was bringing in more synths because that's what was happening in the 80s. And people say about Sammy, well, he made the band wimpier, they made the band more commercial. Name a more commercial pop song than Jump. There's barely any guitar in it, apart from the solo. But that was the Roth era. And then Roth packs up, he goes off, and he made Eat 'Em and Smile, which I think is better than at least two of the Dave Lee Roth Van Halen albums. He carried on doing what Van Halen started doing. He put basically together a little Van Halen clone by bringing in like Steve Vai and then bringing in Billy Sheehan. That was same formula, 4-piece, hotshot guitars, bass, drums, me at the front. That's my band. When Dave grew up and decided to make You Filthy Little Mouth, an album I really enjoy, people hated it. Oh, he's not in spandex. He's not singing about cars and girls, is he? No, but you can't do that forever. And I think that's the thing. People look at that Van Halen period thinking they should still be doing that now. Well, it's going to be a bit shit now if it's guys in their 60s wearing spandex talking about cars and girls. It's gonna come across really lame. It's going to basically put themselves in Steel Panther territory. So they had to evolve as a band to survive, and Sammy gave them the room to do that. I always remember Eddie Van Halen in an interview saying Sammy gave them much more scope musically. He added an extra guitar if they needed it. His voice could go places Dave's couldn't get anywhere near. And as a songwriter, I think Sammy is much better. As a lyricist, Dave's better. Dave gives you more stuff to think about. Sammy stays very much in the like kind of love songs and stuff like that. Whereas I remember Dave saying that people are still working his lyrics out 10 years later. That probably includes him, because some of them you're just like, what? But they sound good in the context of the song. And I think the perfect quote that I saw when I was reading some comments myself is it was like, Dave ain't talking about love and Sammy's asking, why can't this be love? And that's like the two eras of the band. There's like this dangerous sort of rock and roll edge, but then the band sort of grew up. And some of the fans went with them and some of them didn't. There was people saying, the stuff they did with Sammy might as well have been fucking Air Supply songs. Yeah, well, if you watch Live Without a Net, the first sort of live thing they did with Sammy's trying very hard to be Dave, and it doesn't work. Sammy's a phenomenal live performer, when he's allowed to be Sammy, and that's what eventually came. And I think there's a reason why they did a live album with Sammy and they never did one with Dave until recently, which was appalling. But in their heyday, there was no official live album with Dave. It was all about the visuals. It wasn't about what they were doing musically. It was about the show they were putting on. Whereas with Sammy, I think it was more, look at these songs we've done. Aren't we good? Which they were.
So to pin you both down, and Dave, you're saying
David Lee Roth.
David Lee Roth, and James,
on the basis that it's you hear again. It's a little bit before my time gigging, but one of the thing you often hear people ask, "What's the best support band you've ever seen?" And time again, for people of a certain age, you hear them all say, when we saw Van Halen support Black Sabbath on that 1978 tour, they absolutely blew Sabbath off stage every night. And that I've heard that for 40 years. I never saw the David Lee Roth era Van Halen. I did see David Lee Roth on the Skyscraper tour, and he was phenomenal. One of the most entertaining shows I've ever been to. I saw Sammy later with Van Halen and was bored to tears. I agree with what James said about some of the Sammy Van Halen albums being weak. Yeah, I think certainly you could argue that 2 wasn't 1. But definitely Women and Children First was very weak. I thought they pulled it back a little bit with 1984, but to be honest, 1984 was where they headed with 5150. And you say that I could hear what you say about Jump. I mean, yeah, it's a keyboard riff, it's not a guitar riff, but then you get the likes of Panama or Hot for Teacher. So I would just say purely on they came from nowhere, exploded. It was the wow factor that you got was David Lee Roth. Never got that with the Sammy era. Balance was actually my favourite Sammy era Van Halen album. But because I thought that had grown up again, that had got more sophisticated, a little bit more left field. But now I don't think you can take the original excitement of David Lee Roth away from the equation, to be honest.
I think the other thing as well there about saying about support bands, when you think about Sabbath in the 70s, going back to like Showmans and stuff, you got Ozzy basically shuffling from left to right. Tony Iommi stood one side of the stage. Geezer Butler stood the other side of the stage, just playing their songs. So you imagine Van Halen before that, it wouldn't matter what they were playing. If you've got Dave in his spandex cartwheeling about, and it's going to make Black Sabbath look really ordinary, regardless of how well they performed. So again, I think that's like, it's all about the showmanship. Obviously, Eddie's guitar playing was game-changing as well. But yeah, I do agree that the first Van Halen album is the best. There's no doubt about that. But I play more of the Sammy stuff, so...
I think it's probably a debate that's never going to get really settled, is it? It's always going to pop its head up, as these debates on social media often do. But, for us, it's either David Lee Roth or Sammy Hagar. They can't be split. Right then, let us move on to our review section. We're going to expand this one a bit more this week. We've usually just have 1 or 2, but I'm going to let the chaps run wild, basically. And if they have more than 1, that's fine. If they don't, that's absolutely fine as well. So let's start with you, James. Who have you got? Who has impressed you this time round?
Well, I've been playing a lot of is not actually anything new. It's a reissue, and it's the Good to Be Bad reissue by Whitesnake, because it's another one of Coverdale's killer remixes where he hasn't just remastered it; he's improved it. It just sounds miles better. And the other thing he did is, he took the 4 studio songs that were on the Live in the Shadow of the Blues album, and he's put them on here, and they've been remixed in, so they now sound like they're part of the album. And it all works brilliantly. So it's made the album one of Whitesnake's hardest rocking as a result, because when you add things like Ready to Rock and Dog into what was an already fairly hard rocking album to start with, it's just made it better. A lot of the times you get these reissues and it's money for old rope, but this really isn't. It adds something that the original just didn't have. So in this case, 4 songs from a previous thing that was sort of tacked on, they now sound better. Everything sounds sonically better. And if you buy the big box set version, which has got like the deluxe one, there's some outtakes and alternate versions, which usually I'm like, oh, good, a version with a different guitar solo. Not really that bothered. But on this one, I absolutely love female backing singers. That's one of my big things in music. And Coverdale obviously does too, because on this, there's no less than 7 tracks where he has some female singers, which is naturally, in true Coverdale style, dubbed the Hook City Harlots. They appear on no less than 7 of the album tracks. So he didn't put them on the finished album, but you've got the option there if you want to hear them. And I could have happily had them on the album. There's at least 3 of them. I think, like, Lay Down Your Love sounds brilliant with the female singing on. And so does Good to Be Bad, for that matter. But the option's there. You've got the original album just remastered, so it's just a bit louder. You've got the remix where it just sounds miles better because there's more instrument spacing. He's done all these other little tweaks and things where it just sounds better. And then there's this extra disc where you've got the versions where you've got the women backing singing. There is some alternate solos. There's even versions where you can have Tommy Aldridge playing drums instead of Chris Fraser, which is a little bit of a bridge too far. You'd have to be some fan to notice the difference there. But that I've been playing, I was like, it was seen as Whitesnake's comeback album, and it didn't seem to have a lot of love. Yeah, it wasn't a classic, was it? It was their first album since 1990, the first proper Whitesnake album. And as a comeback album, I thought it was pretty good, and now it's even better. So that is something I've been playing a lot of lately.
Brilliant. It seems to me that, I don't know, what you guys think, but it seems to me that Coverdale's, he's very, very clever when it comes to these remastering and remixes. He does seem to be in tune with what people want. I mean, James, you've alluded that the specials that you get on it are pretty impressive, and the lady backing singers that are bringing a new dimension to it. But he always seems to me that when he does release a remixed or a remastered, whatever you want to call them, version, he does seem to have a very, very good ear for this kind of thing.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the debate we had the other day about reissues and their validity, Whitesnakes and the ones that Coverdale's been involved with are always at the top end. There's always something on there that you're going to get that you didn't get first time round, and you don't feel cheated. It's not just like the odd obscure Japanese instrumental bonus track that's bunged on there. He really goes to town on it, and that's it's almost like the rock candy of reissues in that regard, if you like. That's what everybody should allude to. That's what they should be aiming at. But it's not quick and it's not cheap, so they don't. But no, you can't. I can't fault Coverdale. I mean, the guy's very astute. As I alluded to earlier, he realised a long time ago that he wasn't in the same voice that he was in the 70s and early 80s. So he got a band around him that could provide backing vocals to fill in the gaps where he couldn't. And Whitesnake still put on some great shows. So I can't fault his ethical business model at all.
No. And obviously that's a reissue. In terms of new music, Kerry Ellis's new album is absolutely phenomenal. For those who aren't particularly au fait with Kerry's work, yes, I know she's a West End star and stuff like that, but she has crossed over into the rock world because she was plucked out from the West End by Brian May, of all people, who was that taken with her. He described her as having the most beautiful voice in Britain, which is some plaudit. And he said, I will produce your debut album, which he duly did, performed on it, and that got to number 15 in the charts. And it was a really good mesh of rock music and musical theatre. And it worked really well. And then Kerry has since done other albums by herself. She's done another one with Brian. But this newest one, she's decided to go a more modern contemporary pop rock route. And it suits her so well. She's got this phenomenal voice anyway, but she's gone in. It's mostly original. Brian guests on one track, so he's not overshadowing it, but he's there. And it's just really, really good. Vocally, she's always flawless, but I don't think she's ever sounded better than she does on this record. It's a real good mix of up-tempo stuff, epic stuff, ballads. It's really well produced. And it's a really exciting direction for her. And I think it will open her up to a few more people who previously maybe thought, oh, somebody from the West End, no good. It's nothing like, there's nothing musical theatre about this at all. A couple of good covers on it as well. She's done James Taylor's Fire and Rain, and she's tackled Tina Turner's Be Tender With Me Baby. And she does a hell of a job with that. because she can't do like Tina Turner does, which is that sort of raunchiness. So she's gone the other way and decided, well, I'm an actress and a singer, so I'll interpret the lyrics, and she sings it in this sort of like vulnerable, heart-wrenching way. Puts a totally different spin on the song, and I've just been absolutely obsessed with it since I got it. It's fantastic.
Brilliant. Sounds great. Is it out now?
It is. It came out literally at the beginning of this week.
Excellent, people. Go check it out. Glowing recommendation there. Dave, over to you. What have you seen now?
Well, I mean, firstly, I'll make a brief mention. I picked the Def Leppard book up the other day. I've not read it yet. It's a beautiful thing. It weighs a ton. It's called Definitely, and it's written by the band themselves, and there are lots and lots of pictures and whatever in there. It looks fantastic. So once I get round to reading that, I'll sort of give you an idea of what it contains. But it really looks promising. But on the actual musical front, there's a couple I'd like to mention, a couple of new releases. First thing that grabbed me is an album called From Now On by a guy called Thomas Lassar. Now, you're all sat there thinking, who's Thomas Lassar? Now, I don't know if anybody out there remembers, they were originally, would have been classed as a Scandi band in the 90s from Sweden called Crystal Blue. Well, Thomas was their singer. Why it's taken him this long to get his first solo album, I don't know why, although we do have an interview with him in next issue, so maybe that'll tell us. You can see I've not proved that yet. But From Now On, I don't know if it's actually out now or it's very imminent, but it's by the time the mag comes out, it'll be out. It's on Art of Melody, and it basically picks up where their last Crystal Blue album, Detour, left off from, and it's just really good, catchy, melodic, memorable, Scandi AOR songs. You can sing along by the time you've got to the second chorus, let alone the second time through. And it's just chock full of these great upbeat, uplifting songs. So I can't. If you're having a bit of a shit day, I can't recommend it highly enough. Put it on, you'll feel better.
He's on our playlist as well, isn't he? I think we put a track on
it is, yeah. I put it on there. It doesn't say it's either out now or it's out imminently on Art of Melody, and it's called From Now On. The guy's name's Thomas Lassar. The other one that's caught my ear, and it's probably no surprise because I've been a fan for a long, long time, is the new Government Mule, Peace Like a River. Government Mule have probably taken, for me at least, the mantle of coolest band on the planet from old AC/DC.
Right.
They don't seem to be able to do anything wrong. They do everything on their terms. If people like it, great. If you don't like it, well, that's great too. We'll just continue to do it. They released an album 12 months or so ago that was basically really an old school blues album, very old fashioned sort of blues covers. This is a blues album, but it's a bit of more of a modern feel to it. It's quite laid back, but I could listen to Warren Haynes both sing and play his guitar all day. There's just something about him. It's just mesmerising, and it's just full of slow burning, great Government Mule songs. So again, I can't recommend that one highly enough. Something a little different from the cookie cutter melodic rock that seems to be proliferating at the moment.
And again, if you want to check them out, I believe you chose one of their songs for the playlist as well.
I did, yeah.
So there you go. If you go onto Spotify or onto our website, you can see the playlist that we put out for the month of May, and both Dave's suggestions are there. James, I had a request from somebody asking me to ask you, what is your favourite Queen album?
Oh, that's like asking what your favourite child is. Growing up, it was The Game, because that was one of the ones that I just always return to. But as a long-term fan, I think I would pick Sheer Heart Attack.
Yeah. One of the early ones.
Yeah, because I remember when the moment the light bulb came on for me with that album was when Big Bad Leroy Brown came on, and it was just such a mental left turn. But it worked. I was just like, what an album this is. Because it just goes all over the place. It's like Dave says, doing your own thing. I mean, talk about doing your own thing. Literally, it was like, where else can we go? Let's do something a bit vaudeville. Let's do something like basically set the template for thrash metal with Stone Cold Crazy. It's got everything, that album. It's amazing.
going to bring Dave onto this one because there was a shake of the head and a quizzical eyebrow raise when a Sheer Heart Attack was played.
Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with Sheer Heart Attack's a great album. You could level the same at Night at the Opera, Day at the Races, Queen 2, whatever you like. I'd go probably for Live Killers, simply because that's just that captures Queen.
Yeah.
In the Raw at that point in time. It's just a fantastic. Whereas all the studio albums, they're all worked on in the studio. They're products of a period of time. That was Queen bang at that point there. And I just think that captures for me the essence of what Queen was and why Queen were great. That they had towards the end of the 70s, the early 80s, they stretched things further than they'd ever done before in terms of the style. But it still worked. It was still Queen. They were still part of that group like Zeppelin or Floyd that could pretty much do what they wanted and the fans would accept it. You don't get that anymore. And so, as James said, I think you're quite right. You could have a different Queen favourite album for every day of the week. It just depended on how you feel. Just because everything was so diverse, but it was still, at the end of the day, was Queen. And that's what was really magic about it.
Yeah, can't argue with anything that's been said there. So there you go.
What about you, Pete? You're a Queen fan. What's your favourite?
Oh, I was hoping you weren't going to ask.
You've got to be able to take it if you're going to be dishing it out.
Bounce it back on me. Well, again, I mean, as Dave rightly pointed out, you could have a separate one for every day of the week.
If you turn around at this point and say, I think the very best of Queen, that's no good.
Oh, heck. Oh, blimey. They're all so good. I mean, the thing about Queen was that they changed so many genres. They covered so many different types of music. Like you said, each album was a ride. It just started, it ended, and you were up and up and up, and unbelievable. I've got a soft spot for Kind of Magic. I mean, I know that's one of the later ones in respect to what you guys have mentioned, but I don't know. I just thought there was a completeness in some respects about that album. It just, I mean, I know a lot of it was the soundtrack to Highlander and all that, and there's very different opinions on that, but I don't know. I just really like it. I think it's one as well that it's sort of one of my mum and I sort of really bonded us on as well, because being the typical teenager when I was growing up, I wasn't exactly, mum said go left, I went right, mum said up, I said down, that kind of thing. But Queen was the sort of thing that we always came together with. And I think that was an album that we just sort of sit down and listen to and just go, yeah, and it was, 45 minutes of no arguments or anything like that. So I don't know. I've got a soft spot for that one. But thank you, James, for putting me on the spot there. Thanks, mate.
No worries. But I also think when you mentioned the Kind of Magic, it is somewhat overlooked compared to things like A Night at the Opera and Queen 2 and things like that. I would say on a Kind of Magic, I think that's probably Freddie's most complete vocal performance. Because if you listen to that album, you listen to him on things like Gimme the Prize, he's basically a heavy metal singer on that. He's absolutely belting it. But then you listen to things like Pain is So Close to Pleasure, where he's doing a falsetto that wouldn't be out of place in the Bee Gees. And you've got 1 Year of Love and Who Wants to Live Forever and Prince of the Universe. He covers so many bases on the album vocally, and he nails everything.
Yeah. Can't disagree.
Yeah.
Right, I've got a couple I want to throw in the mix as well, and one off air. James and I and Dave had a bit of a discussion about albums that we get assigned, and you sort of listen to the first couple of bars and you think, oh, why me? And I'm not going to mention the one that James did. James said, because obviously that's not fair on the artist, but it made for an interesting debate. Let's put it that way. But I got sent one, and it's a gentleman called Jason Charles Miller. And I listened to the first couple of bars of the first song, and it's hard rock, stroke country, stroke blues, all mixed into one. Now, there's two types of music that I really don't get on with too much, and that's country and folk music. And I'm sure that our reviews editor does this to me on purpose, but I always seem to get quite a few of these. But I must admit, this one grew on me so much that I absolutely love it now. There's Nashville country sounds. There's good old Louisiana blues. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jason Charles Miller, but he I think he's the only actor I think that Marilyn Manson's got signed to his own album, his own record at the moment, and his own label. Beg your pardon, I'll get there eventually. And it's superb. It really is. It's one of those where you sort of think, oh, country blended with hard rock, yes, that can kind of work. And then you throw in some blues and you think, But I must admit, it's absolutely superb. It's called Cards on the Table. If you do get the chance to listen to it, it is on Spotify. I think the album's coming out very soon. It is superb. I really would listen to it. I must admit, I really, really enjoyed it. And so I have to hold my hands up and apologise on to Dave Scott. You picked a beauty for me there, Dave, so thank you very much. I'll let you away with that one. The other one is it's a box set. It's a decade of Delane live at the Paradiso. And I've got to blame Dave Cockett over there for getting me into this lot, because I think you mentioned Delane to me once, and I thought, I'll check them out. And ever since then, I've been hooked. And this box set is 2 CDs and 2 DVDs. It's of the live performance, obviously celebrating a decade. It cost £37.99 from a very popular retailer. And the quality of the DVD, now I always get a bit skeptical, and I know, Dave, you've mentioned this, and I think you have as well, James, that you watch these DVDs of performances and the quality is like, it's not good. You know, the music can sound fantastic, but the actual visual quality can be very bad sometimes. This one isn't. It's superb. It really is a great recording. And I've been watching it, I've been listening to it, and I must admit, it's superb from start to finish. It is expensive, 40 quid for the DVDs and the CDs, but I think it's worth it. So, yeah, that's a bit of a retro one that I've been listening to. Anything else, chaps? Anything else you want to throw in the mix?
I'll throw in, I'm currently reading I Am Ozzy, which is a bit of a laugh. How he remembers anything from that time, because everything usually starts off I was either pissed or coked out of my brain. But it's one of those. It's one of the few biographies I've read that's got lots of those sort of laugh out loud moments. Some of the things, the situations he got himself to is absolutely ridiculous. But it's just a great read. I love Ozzy, as I say, as a frontman, as a character. He's the sort of larger than life personality that modern rock and roll seems to be missing, really. And he's part of a bygone age, and it makes me a little bit sad that there's a generation that's coming along that aren't going to have that. So I could certainly recommend that. I can't really. He's what, 10 years old maybe, but I've just finally got around to picking it up and having a read, and it's while away a few hours, definitely.
Anything from you, James?
Well, a few of the things I was sent to review this issue I've absolutely panned, so I'll just save that for the magazine. You can read my vitriol in the printed form rather than me kick off on air. But so some of that stuff I've had to purge while listening to old albums I really like.
Fair enough. Right. A new section. Let's bring in a new section. I'm going to call this one Facts and Fails. So a question to you both. Jump in if you know the answer. Axl Rose is an anagram, but do you know what it is?
Yes.
Are you prepared to say it on air?
Oral sex.
Yeah, that's the one. Well done. Right then, for a bonus point, then what's his real name?
Oh, it's
Done me there. I can't remember. Yeah.
William Bailey.
That's it. Yeah.
William Bailey. Right then. So, audience, here's a question for you as well. Obviously, leave the answers in the comments below if you know. The Clash's Rock the Casbah was written after the banning of rock music where? Now, I'll ask our two guests if they do know this one. If they do, I'm going to ask them to keep it to themselves. But, chaps, do you know where the music was banned? I
believe so, yes.
I don't know. I'm tempted to say the Casbah, but that sounds quite obvious. No, I don't know the answer to that one.
Fair enough. Well, we'll put the answer up on the next podcast, but obviously leave yours below. Dave, you can leave yours below as well. You know, we'll find out if you're right. But I want to ask you guys a question. Have you ever seen anything funny happen at a concert? And the reason why I'm asking, although this wasn't particularly funny at the time, it just shows how rock and roll Dave Grohl is. That during an enthusiastic rendition of Monkey Wrench, he basically fell off the stage. And this is an 8-foot platform. Landed, broke his leg Obviously, the medics rushed to him, do what medics do, put him on the stretcher. And as he was being wheeled out of the stage, he grabbed a microphone apparently and yelled, "I'm going to go to the hospital. I'm going to get my leg fixed, and then I'm going to come back, and we're all going to play for you again." Which is just typical Dave Grohl. I mean, the man's just a trooper at the best of time, and again, going back to our performance argument, he's probably a great performer. But chaps, have you ever seen anything during a gig that you just thought, "Oh my god"?
I remember once during a Uriah Heep gig, they had to stop the set because Lee Kerslake, God rest his souls, were desperate for a crap. So they had to stop 5 minutes while he went up for a crap. which was hilarious. The sounding just got funnier and more embarrassing. The silence just got funnier and more embarrassing the longer it went on. But that was probably the funniest thing that I've seen.
So I hope the microphone was turned off for that one. And James, what about you?
I remember Chad Smith falling off his drum stool at Chickenfoot. That was quite amusing because Chad's quite an animated character at the best of times. And if I remember rightly, because the place was packed and it was hard to see, there's people all over the place. But if I remember rightly, just finished I'm not sure if it was a full-blown drum solo or like a drum flourish to finish. And he sort of jumped up to hit the cymbals. And as he came down, he clipped the edge of his stool instead of it, and just sort of disappeared behind it, and then popped up again as a Will Ferrell lookalike, just absolutely pissed himself with laughter. That was quite amusing.
Oh dear me. Well, again, listeners, do you have a tale like this? Have you seen something that's happened that's sort of made you laugh? Has it spoiled the concert? Has it enhanced it? I mean, obviously, poor Dave Grohl being carted off probably spoiled the concert for a lot of people, but in typical fashion, like I say, the man's just rock and roll. I do believe as well that they actually did go back and do another gig, so fair play to them for keeping their word. Right, chaps, again, it has been an absolute pleasure. It's been brilliant to talk to you as ever, but we're going to have to end it now, unfortunately. We are running out of time. I'm going to say goodbye. I've been your host, Pete Arnett, so thank you very much for listening. I'm going to say goodbye to our Deputy Editor, Dave Cockett, as well. Thank you very much for joining me, Dave.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Pete. Cheers, guys. Hope you enjoy listening to it.
And also, thank you so much to our art editor, James Gaden, for joining us. Thank you so much, James.
No problem. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope you come back again.
Indeed. We should hopefully have another one next week. Don't forget, issue 102 of Fireworks Rock and Metal magazine is out. You can buy it at WH Smith's or other good news agents, or you can go to www.fireworksmagazine.com. You can buy it either as a digital download or as a hard copy that will be posted out. And don't forget, issue 103 is going to be hitting the stands next month as well, so keep an eye out for that. Until then, keep on listening to the music you listen to. Keep on enjoying it. That's what it's there for. But above all, take care. Until then, goodbye, everybody.
Spread the word by leaving a rating and review on iTunes.
All views heard in this podcast are from the individual and do not necessarily represent those of Fireworks Rock and Metal magazine.